Recording in progress.
Okay, great. Everyone ready to get started? I will call to order the October 16, 2024 Ways and Means Special Committee meeting. Roll call, please.
Chairwoman Sims.
Here.
Alderman Gould.
Here.
Alderwoman Tice.
Here.
Alderman Erger.
Here.
All members are present.
Great, thank you. The next item on the agenda is approval or amendment of the agenda. Are there any additions, amendments, or changes? All right, seeing none, any objection to approve by acclamation? All right, it'll be so approved. Item 3 on the agenda is a report of committee chair and alderman. Thank you, everyone, for putting together these special meetings as we look through the budget for 2025. To the extent we're not able to get through all the topics this evening, we will lay that over to our next special meeting, which is scheduled for October 22nd in this room at 5:30. The tentative departments that are expected to be covered at that time are fire, police, IT, admin, and the EDST, or the Economic District Sales Tax. Yeah, that one. That's all I have. Alderman Gould.
No report.
Alderwoman Tice.
No report.
Alderman Erger.
No report.
Nothing is under the city administrator report for is that, and so there's no report there. Item 5 on the agenda is the department report. 5A is the investment report. Do we have Brad on to take us through that?
Yes.
Great.
Good evening. Hope everyone's well. Yes, so I'm hopeful that Kelly was able to get you this in the board packet. If she didn't, it was my fault because I got it to her pretty late today, so I apologize. Do you all have a copy of my normal report that I provide?
Yep.
There is an attachment. It appears to be your the report
Perfect.
in the format of the
Okay.
reports you've given it. So I think so. Yes.
Wonderful. Okay. All right. Pat on the back to Kelly. Okay. So we did not meet in September. So this is kind of 2 months combined. So what you see here is month ending September. The first portion of this spreadsheet shows to date in the 2014, 17, 18, and 19 debt service reserve fund accounts, along with the general fund account. These funds have made a total of just under $556,000 to date this year. Below that is the chart that is going to stay static all year. This is money that are earnings from the beginning of our relationship until the end of last year. So the $2,745,000, you've seen that number every month this year. The 555 is just earnings from this year. And you add those together, so that's a total. So it'll be what, 3.2 or $3.3 million. If we go to page 2 with the graph, I just always like to show you guys what this looks like on a month-to-month basis as far as earnings go. Earnings increased to about $70,000 in September, the month of September. We had some reinvestments that had some higher yield, but then also we had a little bit heavier weight of securities paying interest in the month of September, which increased the cash flow. I have one more thing to go over, but it's more on a current event basis. So are there any questions on this?
I'm not seeing any.
All right. If we go to page 3, I always like to leave you with something. And you all know that the Federal Reserve, raised the Fed funds rate, I think 13 times over about a year period to slow inflation, to bring inflation down. Last month in September, they finally started to lower the Fed funds rate. So what you see here in the black chart there on my 3rd page is a Bloomberg estimation of federal funds rate, of the Fed lowering the Fed funds rate over the course of time, all the way into towards the end of 2025. So there's a little gray box. I didn't put it in a red box, but on the top right, it says 4.82. That is the current implied rate of the federal fund rate. And that's after they dropped the Fed funds rate from 5.25 or 5.5 down. So we already see it drop to 482. We anticipate another rate drop in November, and that brings the implied rate down to 4.47 and so on. And you see those rates declining. You'll see that personally and for the city and accounts in whatever money is sitting in money market. You'll see that yield decline. I give you this information to tell you that Bola and Michelle have done a great job at guiding me on investing on a monthly basis so that you have securities maturing monthly. This is primarily for the general fund account. And all the yields that you all own going out to end of 2025 and beyond are significantly above what you see in any of those yields in that red box. So the portfolio that you all have put in place in capitalizing on great interest rates, a year or so ago and beyond, are really you're really seeing the advantage of doing that as we are entering a declining rate environment. And any new money that we have to invest, some of those rates have been declining, but you're locked in at rates that are significantly above any of these rates that are anticipated down the road. So that's pretty neat from my perspective, and I just wanted to brag on Bola and Michelle and give you that information.
That's great. Always like to
Other
hear the
than
good
that,
news.
that's all that I have for you.
Great, Brett. I'm not seeing any questions on the committee other than that. Keep up the good work. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you all. Hope you have a good evening.
You as well. Item 5B on the agenda is financial statements.
Hi, good evening. In the package, you have the income statement, the expenses and the revenues as they pertain to August. There's no real highs or lows. By the October statements, we'll start to see the full impact of the compensation study and the 3% and all of the sort of decisions that have been made associated with that. But as far as August is concerned, everything seems overall to be holding steady. It looks well. And then fourth quarter, we'll really start to see the impact of the compensation study and some of the moves that we made. Any immediate questions? I think we got a lot to cover, and I didn't go into a lot of the detail, but any immediate questions?
I'm not seeing any.
And then I will note that in the budget, it also has the current year includes the August financial statements as well. So we were able to go ahead and plug those in when we got ready to produce the book. Perfect. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Moving on, we have no old business. Item 7A on the agenda is new business. 7A is the ambulance billing settlement request.
This is a request that received actually a patient we transported earlier in 2024 from a vehicle accident. They have reached a tentative settlement. They're asking the city of Brentwood to accept less than the billed amount. It would be a write-off of $384.22 if we accept it, us receiving $412.40. We recommend accepting this settlement, but is called out by our billing policy for this procedure.
Questions? All right, Chair would entertain a motion to approve the settlement amount requested in the amount of $412.40 and otherwise stated in the attached memorandum.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
I see a frown from a resident out there. I don't know if it's about this, but I just would indicate that I would imagine it would cost us more to try to get this $300 than we would get. So I just wanted to add that to the commentary.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Chairwoman Sims.
Yes.
Alderman Gould.
Yes.
Alderwoman Tice.
Yes.
Alderman Erger.
Yes.
Motion carries by a vote of 4-0.
Great, thank you. The next one, 7B on the agenda is Fire Department quarterly write-off.
Yes, so again, this has been delayed schedule. Our second quarter for 2024 write-off debt totals $20,706.44. That is a decrease over the prior two quarters. And I did put in this memo, our transports and revenues are increased last year, which equates to additional revenue, even though we do have write-offs occurring. I did provide a report recently to another city. Our current collection rate on all items other than private patient pay, which are no Brentwood residents, 90% collection rate. So far exceeding our comparators out there.
Can you, I'm just looking at the memo, just talk about what you consider to be, quote, soft billing in terms of what we write off for our residents?
Yes, so when we respond and transport a resident, city of Brentwood resident, we collect their insurance information. That includes Medicare, Medicaid, supplements, anything. Bill for our services to those organizations. Whatever they pay, that's all we collect. Anything else is written off. The patients themselves are not to receive bills for service. If they do, it's typically because their insurance wasn't provided, and then it's cleared after that.
Are there any questions on this one? All right, not seeing any. In that case, the chair entertain a motion to approve the write-off debt total in the amount of $20,706.44 and otherwise stated in the memo, and to forward such to the Board of Aldermen.
Second.
All right, got a motion and second. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, roll call, please.
Chairwoman Sims.
Yes.
Alderman Gould.
Yes.
Alderwoman Tice.
Yes.
Alderman Erger.
Yes.
Motion carries by a vote of 4-0.
Great, thank you. Item 7C on the agenda is the reclassification of positions in the Police Department Detective Bureau.
Good evening. This is a request from the police department that went to Bola and to Tangela after the pay study was completed recently. And what we asked to do was reclassify positions within our detective bureau that hold 4 officers. And as you read this memo that we prepared, this particularly applies to the school resource position and the retail officer position. Shortly after I got here in 2018, we asked that the board agree with the school board to go with the SRO, which currently Officer Hobby has got. That position has morphed into a more robust spot than just being a guy with a gun at our high schools and schools. Hobby's responsible for a lot of different things in his job, including being a juvenile detective. So his expertise lies in juvenile court, liaisoning with the judges in the juvenile side, and having a strong knowledge of what can be kind of tricky law when it goes to juvenile procedures for the police. So if we have an incident, no matter what it is, Hobby's called in as, and then takes the case from the juvenile perspective. And the other position that we're asking to classify as a detective position, it's the retail officer position. Currently, Jamie Clark's in that position, and she's responsible for investigating incidents in our retail area that, and as you all know, our retail crime is high. It's often repeat offenders, and it crosses over into a mental health issue as we look at it. Often, many of these people are repeat offenders. Alcoholism, drug abuse, and mental health issues are strong pieces of that. So what we've done is train that position to be able to interface with people that are in mental health crisis. that has rolled away from the retail area only, and she's also done a great job with citizens. So she opens up opportunities through BJC and other resources that we have, without mentioning names in the community, but there's some high-profile ones that we know of last year that I think all of us know who those are, that she's done an outstanding job helping not only the people involved, but the neighborhoods that they were affecting. So what we're asking is that because the classification, and you'll see on the memo that we've written, this takes the detective position up to a grade 17 for those 4 positions. So what we're asking is for consideration for making those 4 positions official positions within our detective bureau, that we would have people apply for, interview, and then assign into the bureau. There is going to be a finite number of years so that there can be some freshness and movement in that position, these detective positions. Right now, I think, and we will talk to Tangela and Bola further about this, but right now we've talked about a 4-year period. So that would be, the assignment would be at the discretion of chief of police, and then after 4 years, that person would rotate back into uniform. That's what we're proposing for your consideration. Bola, did you have anything else to add?
So the cost for this has been factored into the fiscal year '24, and as you know, there will be a budget amendment at a later time for all the changes that have happened, compensation, retention incentive, and things like that. And in talking to Michelle Depew, the finance director, we feel that there's enough wiggle room within the '25 budget that we don't, because all of this happened after the fact, so that we can absorb this cost as well next year. And so what we typically do during the budget process is we're either adding positions or we're reassessing and determining that maybe there's no need for a certain position anymore, or reclassifying a position. So this is the appropriate time to have this discussion, which is why it's on the agenda tonight. So the recommendation is for the approval of the reclassification of the 2 positions.
Alderwoman Tice?
Oh, I am supportive of this, but then I have a question. So this reclassification comes with a step in, an increase in grade. So what happens after 4 years?
Go back to the prior step would be 16.
Okay, so they would,
They know that going in. I'll be very clear in their interview.
thank you.
Alderman Gould?
I'm also supportive of this, but I'm just curious if this would go, has this been brought up to the Public Safety Committee? Is it relevant for them to have any debate over from a philosophical public safety
It could
stance?
be, but they too haven't met. And
Yeah.
so this is the first committee that's meeting in a little while. We certainly can present it to them as well. What we typically do is things like this from the police department go to public safety first before
Right.
it comes to Ways
That's
and
why,
Means.
that's why, I know there's been some delays in some of those meetings as well. I just don't want to if we approve something, could it be approval contingent on the Public Safety Committee's?
I think we did talk to the chair of the committee, was it this item? And knowing fully well that they were meeting, if it would be all right to advance it, and he didn't have any problems with it.
I mean,
Of course, I'm
ultimately,
not-
it's going to have to be, the board has the final decision.
Approve it as part of the budget,
As
exactly.
part of the budget plan, so, okay.
So this would just go on to the board without having gone to
It will-
public safety?
It will be part of the budget. It doesn't go to the board separately.
Right, it would just be.
Part of the
it would-
budget
It would have to be
discussion.
called out of the discussion at the board level.
Right.
If there was an objection to it at that point.
Right.
I sit on
Yeah, well, yeah,
public safety.
right, yeah.
I'm okay with that.
Like,
And we have another member of the public safety in here too.
And,
The
just to
audience.
cover all bases, we can send a separate email to the committee again and say, we're happy to bring it back if you want. However, we've presented it to Ways and Means, and at this time, it will be part of the proposed budget. If they want me to put it back on the agenda, I think there's a meeting coming up on the 29th 28th, 29th? 23rd. Oh, okay.
Works is the 29th.
I learned
Oh,
that the hard
okay.
way once, that it is the fourth Wednesday of the month, and sometimes there are 5 Wednesdays in the month.
So we have a chance to bring it up next week before 23rd, so that's after the second meeting. We'll circle back. I'll let you know. So what would you like to do tonight?
But I'll make a motion to approve the reclassification of the retail officer to retail detective and the school resource officer to school resource officer juvenile detective and include it in the budget and ask that it be discussed at the public safety meeting.
Second that.
All right, we've got a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? All right, seeing none, roll call, please.
Chairwoman Sims.
Yes.
Alderman Gould.
Yes.
Alderwoman Tice.
Yes, sorry.
Alderman Erger.
Yes.
Motion carries by a vote of 4-0.
Thank you, Chief. Item 7D on the agenda is fund balance, policy discussion, capital improvement fund, equipment replacement fund.
So because we're talking about how we fund capital expenses, we thought it would be a good time to revisit the city's fund balance policy, particularly as it pertains to the equipment replacement reserve. So if you recall, since we started the Brentwood Bound project, the city committed to spending more of our resources to advance that project. So for the past several years, we have deferred some of the equipment replacement. And we've been able to defer it because they were still in some good condition and we could move along until it became critical that those items be replaced. So Michelle has talked to Gina to learn a little bit more about how the city created the equipment replacement refund. So the genesis of this was Gina Jarvis when she started in 2012. So she created the equipment replacement refund.
Yes, she did. On page 26 of your current budget, this is sort of what just drove the discussion internally when I started to touch the budget and put my arms around capital improvements in particular. And working with staff, there is a line item called Assigned Fund Balance Equipment Replacement Reserve. And that has been growing. I did go back to 2013 and 2014 and look at the budgets, and it was established actually in 2013. In 2013, you established it with $520,000 with a growth rate. By 2014, there was the hope to put $810,000. By 2023, there is $4.2 million in the reserve for replacement reserve. So in speaking with Gina and being able to be fully staffed, and Jim McIntyre is assigned to the assets for the city, we were able to extrapolate the dollars needed, and that should have been needed all along had we been placing the dollars to do the replacement for the assets that you have. So we have sort of gone back full circle and said, here are the assets we have, here's the dollars that should be in place, and here's what we should do with them. So when we approach 2025, that is part of the proposal in here. There is a proposal to start to use down this equipment replacement reserve with the items that should have been associated with the reserve. They would have been associated with the assets that have been purchased all along, and had you been replacing them on a timely manner and then placing the funds back in, you would have had a program that the mechanics would have been working. So when we put together the 25 budget and then so on, such as the fire truck, the phone systems, the vehicles replacements, those items, and we keynoted the items that would be in the reserve program based upon this line item especially. So we went back and made sure that you had been sort of accumulating the dollars associated with it, and then we figured out what the items were, and then we earmarked them, and so we have making the proposal to establish and utilize these dollars for some of the items that should be replaced and need to be replaced. It's a long-winded way to say, I think we've got it figured out.
So you've probably noticed in the 25 proposed budget that we're funding more of our capital items. So we just wanted to highlight for you that that's what's making it possible. And, you know, I think it was last year that the board approved cash funding the fire truck and the related equipment that goes on that. So it's also this equipment replacement reserve fund that we're tapping into. We're not suggesting that the policy be changed. We're just highlighting it and reminding everyone that it's there and that it was created in 2013. And now that as we start to replace these items, we're updating the replacement schedule and putting in more current value to replace them so that we can start to rebuild that account back up. And if you look at the capital improvement budget, you will see that by 2027? The amount of money that's left has dwindled, so we might find ourselves in the position that we were, for instance, prior to last year, where we once again have to slow down how we replace until we fully replenish all of that. So as the department directors come up and present their capital budget, you, I guess, keep an eye, listen to that from that perspective, because that's why we're able to do that. Of course, I asked Michelle that, so there's this pot for equipment, but then there's also money that general revenue that's coming into capital revenue that we're using for things like street replacement, sidewalk replacement. So there's that component also that's funding capital. Questions? Or
If you were to look in page 181 in the budget, internally, I did designate the replacement items. Normally, the capital replacement items are coded with a 6,500 at the end of it. The replacement program items for any of the departments have been coded with a 6,501. So should you decide that the program is too aggressive or you're just not necessarily prepared to even have the conversation, the 6,501 items for any of the departments are listed as the replacement items to be taken out of the assigned fund balance for the replacement program.
And
So not all items can, if you go to page 181, and if you go at the very top, this one is in particular is the example for the fire department.
Okay.
And then it says 6501 is the last four digits. This is outside of the realm of the normal capital request. These are the items that fall in a replacement program, because not all items do. Not all assets, so the phone systems will be denoted for that. For the fire department in particular, it's the ambulance and the fire trucks. The body cams for the police department fall into that. So not all items fall under the replacement program. They are associated back to the asset list generated by the auditors and audited. So then if you look on page 180, under the 6,500, these are the items that are being funded by that year's sales tax and within that request. So once again, there is the option to sort of say, we're not necessarily ready for the program. These items potentially would have maybe been cut had we not tried to implement the program for 2025 and so on. But it was a program, once again, that was established. You have been growing it at a rate, and these were some pretty big purchases that, once again, the city phone system's 10 years old. I'll let them all get into the details, but.
Well, I am so glad to understand that, because I looked at last year's budget, like for the fire department, and this year's, and I'm like, it's not the same order, and why are there some over here? And so thank you for, I really
Yeah, once again, the
appreciate
6501 are ones, so that way if we decide that the program is either too aggressive or we're not prepared for it, we can remove those documents, and it doesn't change the manner in which you move forward, even with the capital program. We can just do the other capital items and the request, or potentially decide, you know, did you want to taper down the ability of the replacement program? So it can stand alone as well. So hopefully that's helpful.
So is there a policy in place on that fund that says that we can only go 50% of what's in there or in that reserve fund?
I believe the policy associated with that is that you keep 5% in the capital and not in the replacement. So it's that there is a 5% fund balance. And so any of the dollars that superseded the 5% were automatically placed in the replacement program. So prior to sort of having a full finance staff. So just by the dynamics of how the capital fund was working, you were assigning dollars and placing them in the replacement program all along. So my understanding is for fund balance, it's 5%. And so you maintain that 5% on the regular, and then the rest of it has gone into the replacement program.
But the replacement program fund, theoretically, we could use all that money that's in there.
That's correct.
And
Yes. And then as you can see, and then in the next 3 years, it does go down fairly quickly. And part of that is the big purchases for the fire truck, and the ambulance, that's 500, and then like the phone system and the body cam. So those are really big purchases that probably in 10 years you won't need, we'll build that back up and make sure that we're putting those dollars in replacement dollars. Part of the dynamic of the program is the replacement dollars and making sure we're adhering to that.
yeah, I mean, I wonder about if we spend it all too aggressively, what vulnerability does that leave us?
Part of the other conversation we had internally, the vulnerability is that then any of the infrastructure or the buildings aren't in that. It is the replacement. So once again, those are some of the discussions potentially to have, but the replacement program, those are the dollars that should have been associated with it all along based upon the list of assets that we currently have.
I think a question was asked about, is there funds in the 25 budget for the Public Works Parks building? And so, that is really contingent upon how the redevelopment project moves forward. And since there's always a lag, I think we'll have enough time to be able to model that into a future budget, either for renovation that needs to take place, or cost to move those two departments there. So right now, there is no plan for 2025, but given the discussions that we're having offline, we think there could be a potential for you to see cost associated with that in the 2026 proposed budget.
Well, I mean, I guess the question that I have related to that, it wasn't my understanding that we were doing this. I mean, yes, they're correlated to potential redevelopment on Manchester Road in the sense that, we have a very big part of the property there that needs to, we have to move our place off. And that was a long-term vision anyway, because it's not the best use of frontage of Manchester Road for public works. I didn't realize that we would be potentially getting a new building and then just sitting on it until.
Actually, that's not what we're doing.
Okay.
Dan? And share with the committee some of the plans that you have even for the current year.
What we plan on doing with the building was, the back of it already has a loading dock. Some of you are aware that went over there. There's a garage door, concrete retaining wall. And then what we were going to do is use some existing concrete blocks that we have, the big Lego blocks, build those, basically another wall, fill that with rock, and then put asphalt over it and make our own ramp. That way parks or whoever can actually put equipment in there that's at the current shop and make more room for the sanitation trucks or whatever. They don't need to be in our shop now if I can make room there. I just need the ability to get it up to the loading dock without having to abut it and pull it off the back of a truck. I can just drive a truck in there, which we think we can. And that's the goal. But I have to draw something up and go through planning, to get a permit. I can't just build it.
I mean, that if we start using the space as it is, and we start filling it up with equipment and storage of things, then when we want to do a renovation, we've got to get everything back out and,
we were going to put it in the area that isn't being renovated. If you recall, it's only that back section.
Right,
cross
cutting it off and
cut away and then rebuild.
And there are equipment that we would drive in and we could drive out.
well, sure, no, I understood that, but yeah, I just hesitate, like, starting to just use it for storage and a whole bunch of other stuff, and then have
In
to
the appropriate
be a
place.
construction zone, yeah.
And we had talked with police about they could use it for their training, especially in the winter time.
Okay.
Alderman Tyson.
So, the comment that we might be doing something with this in 2026 is not reflected anywhere in the capital budget. And it's just like the fire training station last year. Like, we didn't know if we were gonna do it or not. It was a possibility, but it wasn't in the capital budget, and then we had to blow it up and do different things. So why is that?
That cannot be in the 26 capital budget. You all will be the first to know if there's progress. And those discussions will be held in closed session.
Agree, but if there's,
So we've been updating the board in
So-
closed session.
so I guess knowing that, I
Right.
have a different lens, looking at what we're proposing in 25 and what we're looking at in 26, because knowing that there might be money in the next couple years that's needed to redo a building, like, where's that gonna come from? And it,
Changes. And so, the budget is only a plan.
right.
And it's a plan that ours goes out for 3 years, but because you're adopting each annual budget, there's flexibility to make the change.
Agree, but
And we always, historically, have made changes. So either we continue to believe that we're flexible enough to make the changes, and because your department directors are here and listening to that, they too have to have an understanding that what they may be asking for in 26 and 27, because things change, they might not get it. At least as long as I've been here, that has been the practice. Because it's in the budget doesn't mean you automatically get it.
I completely agree 100%, but I also think it's important to look at, like, I harped on this last year, and it looks better than it has. I'm assuming we're following it, but a capital budget is sort of a blueprint. It's not exactly the blueprint, but it's sort of a blueprint of what's gonna come. And if we know that there are big things out there that aren't reflected in the capital budget, then that's sort of a failing. Like, if we expect to be able to buy a new ambulance or new fire trucks or repave roads, and then all of a sudden we're like, oh no, we can't do any of that stuff because this other thing we thought was gonna happen and we kind of know it's there, but didn't put it in the budget, and then now we're cutting all this stuff that the departments are expecting to get. So
I hear what you're saying, but it goes both ways. And a good example I can share with you is the Central Fire Training. We didn't know about that.
we knew about it last year. We had it, it was way out.
Well, but we didn't know about it prior to last year.
Right, but in the capital budget, it was like in 2028 when we knew either we were gonna be in it and it was gonna be this year, or, like, we knew it, there was no way we were paying for it in 2028. We just put the placeholder in way out.
What do you want us to do?
I might have a recommendation.
Okay.
Would it be easier to potentially look at the capital budget and commit fund balance funds? Such, to be a reminder that the redevelopment may be coming, because you don't have to necessarily commit the expenses, because part of the dynamics of the redevelopment, how I understand it, is that potentially they were going to you had some revenue, you had some expenses, so it's difficult to build in expenses and then throw us over budget for such items. Is it an easier potential conversation for staff to consider, almost like you did the equipment reserve account and committed those dollars there? Would you like to see a line on page 20 or 21 that sort of says committed redevelopment and us placed dollars out of the existing fund balance?
I mean, that could work, or even if there's a
So you can continue
line.
the conversation?
Yeah, I think that could work, or even if there's a line of design fee for that building, because even the design for that building would be a lot. So if that's in there.
Okay, understood.
That like in parks, Eric sort of has a little of a capital budget this year, but like he has some design for parks, and you're like, well, you're designing something at Mount Calvary Park, it's gonna cost, it's way out there, but at least okay, if there's a design for Mount Calvary Park, then we know in the next few years it's gonna come.
Right.
So if there's design fee in there, at least you could read that and think, oh yeah, well, we know that money's gonna have to come in the next few years for the
And there was
redesign.
design fee, if you remember, this year for the Public Works Parks building until, that wasn't really moving forward. So perhaps it was an oversight that we didn't carry it forward.
Yeah.
But I think you really need to think about, so Michelle talks about fund balance. So this is capital. So it's the capital fund balance.
Right.
So we'll model this in, and, you'll see the change at the next meeting.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions?
Not seeing any.
So there are a lot of slides in this presentation. As a matter of fact, a total of 26. Some of them might seem redundant, so I'm going to go through them fast. They're all in your budget book. When the department directors present theirs, you'll hear some of the same things. So what I might do for some of the slides is just pause and allow you to read it.
And I'll just note before you get started, please treat this as a open forum. Feel free to, I mean, if it gets away from us, I revise retain the prerogative to change my mind, but, feel free to ask questions as they come up.
So I should ask, can everybody hear me? We've gotten some feedback about the
I can,
microphones. You can?
it's just whether or not the
the
live stream can
people-
hear you. Okay.
Checked? Okay, so we have Martin here with IT, just to make sure that he's also hearing some of the feedback we heard and working well with STL-TV. There's new personnel, so hopefully everything works well for those who are listening online. State statute requires that we present a balanced budget. So before you this evening is a balanced budget. Your total revenue for all funds is 31.4 million. Total expenditures, all fund, is 30 million. And we have met the city's fund balance policy. So a breakdown of each one of these funds: general fund proposed budget is 16.4, capital improvement is 3.7, economic development 3.7, stormwater and parks improvement 7.8, and sewer improvement fund is 144,387, total of 31.8. Majority of the city's revenue sources is sales tax. So before you is a pie chart that shows that 74% of your revenue is derived from sales tax. And then there's a breakdown of all the other taxing sources. There's fines and forfeitures, there's intergovernmental revenue, 2%, investment, 2%, miscellaneous revenue, 0.% and then property taxes, which is 2%. So just wanted to show that. And then the next slide gives you the specific dollars for each one of those different revenue sources. Once again, sales tax is 21 million, and then licenses and permits, 2 million, utility taxes, 1 million, and then the rest. Why are our general fund revenues, why are our capital improvement fund revenues, stormwater and park improvement fund going up? These increases that we're going to see a little bit this year and a majority next year are because of the early payoff of two of the outstanding tax increment financing districts, primarily the Meridian and the Hanley Station. Also, we are seeing use tax increase as people continue to shop online, and not just them, but businesses and all their equipment that they're purchasing. Also, licenses and permits are also going up 4.35%. When the department directors present theirs, they will go into more detail as to the rationale behind some of those increases. The city has not really relied on real estate and personal taxes, personal property tax, for significant revenue source, but on the slide it shows how much the city derives from that, a little over 400,000. We are meeting the city's fund balance policy. 50% is for general fund. We're actually at 66%. Capital improvement is 5%, 5%. Stormwater and parks improvement, 15%. We're at 15%. And or that. And then economic development sales tax, we're just showing how much is left because we have spent some money from that. You remember, we purchased the Public Works Parks facility.
One above's the lateral sewer.
Oh, sewer lateral improvement. Oh, I think Alderwoman Tice, thank you for that, and I created this, um, asked the question, did we pay off the debt? For several years, the city was spending a lot of money to do sewer lateral improvements. We were actually borrowing money from the general fund until the Public Works Committee changed that policy and set a limit that could be used by residents, I believe 3,500 for that. So once we are able to save significant money, then we might bring back this policy for reconsideration. But right now, the city's in a good spot, and we're not making any recommendation to the change in the policy as it is.
Can I ask another question? The general fund balance, I believe, I think the answer was, I had asked a question about whether the St. Louis County funds are included in that.
are.
So our actual is not.
That will change.
That will change.
Once that,
Okay.
that is resolved.
Okay.
And it looks like that is imminent.
But that's higher. It's not
Exactly.
actually 66% that we have.
So do you have any idea? We'll do the calculation to see what it will be, but I'm sure it'll probably be more than 50%. Right. So this just provides you an overview of all the different funds and what the fund balance policy is for each of the funds. Questions?
And I'm just, I guess, missing this, but on the assigned fund balance capital reserve,
What page are you on?
the one that she's showing, on page 26, why was the budget in 2024 at a deficit, it seems like? Is that because we're going to need to do an adjustment?
Those are the dollars that we plan to spend out of that reserve fund, and I believe that is part of the radio replacement program. Cash fund.
Oh, because we're getting a grant.
Yes, and so that would be, so part of that mechanism, should you approve the program as it is, it would come out of that equipment replacement reserve. Mark them and have them saved along
And
those items.
I'm actually talking about the line item that's just under the equipment replacement reserve, the capital reserve.
That is the 5% that 5% to meet the fund balance.
Okay. No.
Okay. Yep.
Okay, so now we move to expenditures. And, Ways and Means did a heavy lift, presented to the board, and board approved a compensation plan in 2024 at the 60th percentile. And also going forward, starting in 2025, we will be modeling the consumer price index, 5-year average, to make sure that we're able to stay current with our comparators. 3.5% step increase for each pay classification, and then the consumer price index is a 3.9% for a total of 7.44. And this will extend the relevance of the compensation study and the pay grid to make sure that we remain closely aligned with our targeted percentile of 60%. And then the city could refresh that every 3 to 5 years. I think the November 7th Board of Aldermen meeting, we will be presenting the 2025 compensation schedule. Because it's gone through Ways and Means already, I think it makes sense to just take it to the board. Because every year you have to re-adopt an ordinance, repeal the old one, and approve the new. So this pie chart also shows that a majority of the city's expenses is in personnel services. 49%. And then debt service is 16%, capital is 7.45%, and then transfers out. So the next several slides just shows you what those are for each of the respective funds. Um, Next one is stormwater, that's 66%. Improvement, there are no personnel expenses paid out of this fund. It's primarily contractual and supplies and equipment that we would need to continue to provide that service. This, I think if you refer to your budget book, you probably are able to see this better, but this slide just shows the 25 expenditures by department, all funds. So just to highlight, and this will be redundant because the department directors will cover this. What? Oh, oh yeah, you.
I pointed out the picture to Alderman Gould, and it got a chuckle.
Immortalized.
So in administration and each department that has personnel, so not including legislative or sustainability, a majority of those increases, percentage increases that we're seeing is due to the adoption of the compensation plan. In administration, we will be completing the communications plan next year, which is branding, marketing, logo, style guide. Sustainability, we will continue to provide those items that are listed there. And then planning department, their legal expenses are going up. We have our zoning council attending more of the different support committees for planning and development. We will be completing the architectural design guidelines, starting the process to update the building code to the 2024 International Building Code. And this is a partnership between planning development and the fire department. So they would be working jointly to achieve this end. Also, currently have a senior multidisciplinary inspector, and we reclass that to a multidisciplinary inspector. We've had that position now for about 2 years, and we have been unable to fill it. We believe that there is interest if we were to change the title of the position, so we would like to explore that. Also, the fact that we have a compensation plan, I think it might make other people that were not giving consideration to some of our positions now have interest in them. Same thing in municipal courts and fire and police increases because of the compensation plan. General statement for the fire department, they will continue to invest in their personnel and professional development, safety and equipment, and present a purchase agreement for the replacement of an ambulance in the police department, investing in professional development of our employees. So we have a tuition reimbursement program, so they will be participating in that. Also an increase in their overtime budget, supplies and materials, enhanced officer training. Also the cost for East Central Dispatch is going. They also participated in a compensation study. And so we have had a lot of turnover in keeping dispatchers. So unlike the city, where we adopt a compensation plan and it's effective immediately, in ECDC, it's a 3-year plan to get them to the percentile that would be ideal in the marketplace. And Chief Spees talked about the reclassification already. Public Works, you will notice that we are reducing funding for part-time employees. Alderwoman Tice asked if the compensation plan now makes a difference in the department. We are hopeful that it is. We only have one vacant position that we're trying to recruit for, the Public Works Supervisor, Kyle's old position. So we hope that we will find the right candidate for that position. There's duplication in there that I gotta take out. And then we get to capital. So capital fund, 6% increase in sales tax due to the early payoff of the 2 districts that we mentioned. Also, there is potential for the sale of city property. There's interest income, intergovernmental revenue, and the equipment replacement reserve. And so this next slide just shows you an overview of what we are proposing in the capital improvement. And you can either ask questions tonight, or if you wanted to get into the more detail of it, when the department directors present their budget, you can ask all the questions you want, because then they'll be prepared to talk about it at length. Stormwater, also a 10% increase in sales tax, same reason. There is a transfer from the economic development sales tax to fund the 2018 debt service. And then we're seeing some program fee increases. Every year, Eric brings to the Public Works Committee proposal to reevaluate some of our fees, and that is reflected in that. Also, there's additional revenue that we are now able to realize from the Brentwood Park, the pavilion, and all the amenities that we have there. And so this is the schedule going forward for the rest of tonight, October 22nd, November 7th is hopefully we will be at a point where a recommendation on what would be the 2025 adopted budget would be able to go to the board, and then that will be a first reading on November 18th, and also the first reading of the 2025 compensation, and then December 2nd, second reading of both. Questions?
Not seeing any.
Thank you. Planning, I think you're up.
I have a procedural question. Like you had noted there, the capital budget, and I would, in past years, we've sort of just talked about each department's capital budget when they're up there. Is that the plan?
I feel like that
Okay, good.
works
Thank you.
best.
Kelly, can you help? Oh, I gotta take it out.
Oh, good evening. So we are still seeing a strong residential development in the city. Building permits have increased and inspections have increased by 45% over last year. And actually last year was a 60% increase in the year before. So we are very strong in the residential and commercial development. There's also been a 20% increase in the occupancy permits and 61% increase in inspections over the same time period from January 1 to August 2024. We've a lot of projects at the Planning and Zoning Commission, Board, and Board of Adjustment. From January to August, there was 18 projects at the Planning and Zoning Commission and 6 text amendments that included the floodplain regulations and LOMO April initiative for the Sustainability in Public Works Committee. We've had 11 projects at the Architectural Review Board and 11 variance requests at the Board of Adjustment. And we've reviewed approximately 600 annual active business license for renewal and coordinated with the Finance Department on those. Our goals is to continue to provide superior development application and process and permitting, We will continue with the development of the architectural design guidelines, and following that will probably be a number of text amendments that we would look to incorporate as well. And as Bola already indicated, we are looking to update to the 2024 ICC building codes. And we are making progress in gaining support of the long-term floodplain management and the redevelopment goals of the Manchester Road corridor. So the general fund revenues for the department include that the proposed budget for occupational license, which include all business license and contractor registrations, is $1.675 million. This is a steady increase over the last 5 years. Building permits was increased to 250,000 based upon the new building permit fees, and we are close to that already projected for 2024. Planning and zoning applications also increased to 2,500 because we're currently estimated at 2,605. And other line items were generally kept in line with the prior budget. So, do you have any questions on any of those? The expenditures include a 15.69% increase in personnel services. That is due to the compensation study. In 2022, we had budgeted for a second senior inspector to help with the load, but we have not had any qualified candidates. So we are requesting that we move that down to the multidisciplinary inspector to allow for some internal growth within the department, or maybe pull from a larger pool of applicants, external. The legal fees, as Bola already indicated, increased by 25% due to the significant code enforcement issues we've been undergoing, as well as zoning matters and the legal counsel attending more meetings. And then travel went from 7,000 to 10,000 due to the increase in travel costs, new staff training, and all of the certifications that are required. And uniform purchases supplies also increased due to the increase in staff. Okay.
So I have a question about the code, you know, the goal of shifting to the 2024 codes. Are there budget implications to that, or is that, because I know that there's, at Public Works, we have a lot of discussion about whether or not we're aligned with some of the other surrounding municipalities, and sometimes when we're not aligned, it makes it difficult to call in other support, because they're on different codes. What the county's doing, what the county plan is?
My understanding is the county is looking to move to the 2024 as well. It includes a number of, and the fire chief can also address this as well, but it includes a number of fire protection issues, especially regarding electrical vehicle charging stations that we really would like to see incorporated. So I think a lot of the municipalities are moving up to that, the 2024, because of that. It will take a significant time. It's a huge project. We have to go through everything. We've just gotten the books. The books from the ICC have only just been released. So it will take a significant amount of staff time. If we decide at some point we need to bring other people in, I think there's enough room in my budget under miscellaneous contractual that would be able to assist in that.
Great. And then I just had a couple of questions as it related to, I noticed in the capital improvement as it related to, I think, computers on 144, and then when you go into the capital improvements fund and kind of look at that, it had a $2,000 computer estimated for 2024 because of the new position, but you also have it in the 2025 column. Is that a mistake, or is that a?
No. So that was a mistake. That was, so we just hired the part-time position that came in. So that was, 2024 was for one of those. So in 2025, since we still have the open position for the senior multidisciplinary inspector, it would be for that as well.
Okay, so that's not the same staff member, is what you're
Right.
saying. And then what is the line underneath that review, on page 184?
Oh, I didn't get that whole page.
Because it's another, I mean, again, these are small, relatively small, but I just wanted to make sure, because it, comparing, again, last year's proposed plan for 2025, and now, it jumped up, so, just curious on what that review line item was. It's $1,800.
Larry Covey could address that during, not Martin. Martin, do you know the answer to that?
Review, like the word review. Okay, well, maybe we just kind of just check that and make sure, again, it's not a significant amount of money. And then there's, last year in this line item, we had ARB 1 and ARB 2 both with $800, and right now it's only in the 1. Is there a reason why the ARB 2 800 dropped off? It's just little nitpicky things, but
Yeah, was that 800 for
an iPad maybe? I don't know.
Bluebeam software we purchased for the,
Oh.
yeah,
For the software,
For the
Brandon's
architecture,
shaking his
yeah.
head back there. So for them to be able to make the edits and
Correct.
on the fly, so we only needed it for one computer, is that right?
correct.
Okay. So that's why it's not 800 for both.
Whitney, don't we have members of ARB that have that from their work?
From what I understand, though,
And
they
it
had to
worked,
have
but we
it,
also purchased it last year, so it's available here at the
Others?
city.
Okay.
yeah, from a licensing standpoint, I think I heard that they needed to have a version of it here so that they could use the computers here and do it.
Oh, I'm in the same page with the capital things. So I noticed, and this is maybe more of a question when we do IT, but I've noticed that 3 departments in City Hall have new $11,000 printers. And with the limited amount of things that we are currently printing, it just seems excessive that there are 3 printers in this building. So, you're the first one, so you get.
They're copiers.
Well, copiers, but like how much stuff is copied? How frequently are those used to have 3 in one building with courts, with planning and development, and with administration?
We
Well-
will have Larry address that question.
Okay.
But we use ours frequently we have to mail out public notices for all projects at the Planning and Zoning Commission, Architectural Review Board, Board of Adjustment.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
ARB,
Copying
yeah.
quite a bit of
So you're,
stuff.
yep.
Sunshine law requests.
The sunshine law request. Sometimes it's easier for people to look at some of the drawings that are submitted online on paper, so we provide,
Thank you.
I thought I saw Alderman Weggy's hand shoot up.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely, yeah, and unless it will be my intention that at the end of each department, that to the extent there are aldermen in the gallery, I can either look for raised hands, call on you individually. I had no question, but take it away.
Yeah, kind of to Jeff's point about the going up to the.
Come up to the mic, Mr. Weggy.
Brandon Wiggy, 8537 Douglas Court. Yeah, so when we went up to 2018 code, I remember there was a sizable charge for code books.
We've purchased those books.
We already have those already?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. It was called to my attention that we advertised a budget, a public forum on that, and it wasn't on the agenda, but I thought now would be a good time to jam that into this agenda. So I guess at this point, if there's anyone public who would like to come forward with part of that public forum, we just ask that you state your name and
My name is Stu Clark, 2331 St. Clair Avenue. I just think as we're looking at budgeting funds, that it is important we think about this redevelopment on Manchester Road and funding additional assistance to bring forth other potential developers. So we know we put that out. We attended a lot of meetings supposedly and put that out. But I think it's, as that property sits there and Green Street goes by the wayside, there might be a line item in the budget, or just think about the budget, that we may need assistance that we don't have in the city of Brentwood to really get things going. So anything we can do in that regard, I think, is probably worth at least talking about.
gallery in person that I'll get to online in a second that would like to come forward. Okay, well then, back to our regularly scheduled programming. What we have next is it public Parks and Rec. Or
It should be Parks
Mine went to-
and Rec is the next one.
Eric, come on down.
I think I'll go through the stuff fairly quickly, but so for 2024, we did a lot of things, but three things in particular that we're very proud of. The first is we opened the Brentwood Park Destination Playground. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that day. It was a wonderful day, a highlight of mine. And as we've mentioned, we've seeing data showing that we've already had 100,000 people use Brentwood Parks. The Brentwood Park in the last year, so we're really excited about that. Just last week, we were named one of the 214 departments across the country and the 5th in Missouri to be nationally accredited by the NRPA and the CAPRA Association. This is in line with CALIA and police, if you know that, but this is the highest accreditation achievement that you can have. So again, this is something that we take a lot of pride and honor in. And then hopefully at Monday's meeting, we will be adopting the brand new Brentwood Parks Master Plan. So 3 big things this year. Obviously, we did a lot of other things. We were real excited about the drone show. The solar eclipse was a wonderful event. We've earned $70,000 in pavilion rentals this year between the Brentwood Park Event Pavilion and the Destination Playground Pavilion. So those two facilities are really heavily used. Some things we're looking to do next year, and again, I won't take them in direct order, but now that we've really launched Brentwood Park and we're really excited about that, we also don't want to forget about the rest of the park system. The master plan is the highlight of that, and making sure that we implement our capital improvement plan to reflect what's going on or what will be adopted in the Brentwood Parks and Recreation Master Plan. We're also looking to launch kind of a monthly social series that kind of highlights each park within the Brentwood Park system. I think Sophie, our marketing person, does a really good job, but we want to take kind of the next level and kind of just remind people that all those wonderful other places are still there. Other things we're looking to do, obviously, sustainability, as we continue to work through the sustainability plan. And one of the things that our department can do very easily is develop that family toolkit to enhance its sustainability awareness and promote that some more. And also look at sessional tree planting throughout the park system. So a lot of things that we're looking to do. Fund balance, you've heard me say this every year, and I We'll say it again because it's one of my favorite stories, is when I first got here, BOLA told me I have to build the fund balance year after year after year so that we have a generous fund balance for any big things, any big projects we might want to have in the future. We used some of that fund balance when we renovated the community center in 2015. We used some of it to help purchase Mount Calvary and also the Brentwood Wetland Arboretum. And we also used some of it to help with the destination playground, some of those final features that we wanted to include. We said in August that after we estimated the fund balance to be $1.2 million after Brentwood Bound. I am more excited than anyone else that Brentwood Bound will be finished and my fund will finally be the fund again. And we're showing about a $1.5 million fund balance, so we're a little bit ahead of what we thought we were going to be, so that's great. But you'll see the net bottom line continues to grow. It's not as aggressive as it has been in the past, but there are reasons for that, and we'll talk about that here in a second. The revenue highlights, we do see 7% increase in sales tax. You've heard that. That's from the TIF financial districts. We are seeing 11% increase in programming fees. Our programming staff does a wonderful job between skate lessons, all the youth and adult programs that our general programming staff does, fitness, those type of things. And then you'll see that increase in rental revenues between the meeting room and the park pavilions. And so we've talked about it the last few years about the increase of programming revenue. We kind of saw it increasing before COVID. Obviously, COVID was a bad year, couldn't really bring a lot of people in the program, but you see we are estimating over 200,000. It's a high water mark for the department. Some of that was due to the addition of a new staff person you guys agreed to last year, a new specialist who's really focusing on that adult programming and fitness and senior programming that allows Cheryl to focus more on youth programming and special events. So I think that's been a really nice addition to the team. Expenditures, you do see the 10% increase in personnel services. That is, as you know, the increase of full-time staff salaries. The other thing that we did this year was include $250,000 to transfer to what we're calling the Brentwood Parks Maintenance Improvement Liquidity Fund. I know we're still working on the fundamentals of how we actually do that. I don't think it'll be its own fund. I think it'll be a reserved dollar. And so we're working on that, but I did program that, basically holding that $250,000. Our goal is to get to $1 million in the first 4 years, see where we're at, whether we need to keep that, whether we need to move that back a little bit. But really it is to try to plan for the future of Brentwood Park and something that we think is really important to do. And then you also see increases in supplies and materials, and that's a lot of that's just the cost of doing business, as you've heard, and will continue to hear. Street trees, as a reminder, we took over street trees. The Parks and Recreation Department took over the management of street trees in 2016 from the Public Works Department. We did talk to the city attorney at the time of where that should be funded, and he stated at the time that expenditures did not meet the criteria of the Stormwater and Parks Improvement Fund, which is why it remains in the general fund. Please.
Right, open forum.
That, to be honest, Alderman Tice, I'm sorry if I misremembered that. We could look into that. As you see, we average about $100,000 a year in street trees. If we move that back into the Parks and Stormwater Fund, again, I just need to confirm that with the city attorney.
From what I understand,
Right. No,
it's not. Thank you.
and I apologize. I understand. Utilizing some of the revenue coming in from programming,
Right.
rentals, those things, fees and charges. to utilize that for street trees.
And and last year, the request was, you want us to do it this year? And I said, no, do it next year, and it wasn't done. So that was a,
From Ways and Means Committee on that. It's the forestry cost, expense that's funded out of general fund and public works. So 100% of that going forward should come out of stormwater parks. Is that what you're asking?
that was what I had asked for last year, and for the staff to look at it, and then it didn't come in this budget, so and I may not, there may not be agreement. It just, there are a lot of public works things that happen.
And there's pros and cons to each. And one of the things I will say is that I'd say in most municipalities, the tree program is run by the Public Works Department because that is a street program. I took it over for numerous reasons. I was happy to do so, continue to be happy to do so. But it is, it is an expenditure, as you said. What we would have to do is reduce, and really the only place we reduce is capital. So when you asked the question about why we only have $500,000 in capital coming up, there's multiple reasons for that, which I'll explain. And that would just reduce capital even more. So it can be done. It would come with that cost. There's really, much like anywhere else in the budget, we're pretty lean as far as expenditures. There's not so much of a gravy that we're holding. Mine is capital, because everything runs through my own fund. So it would be, that's what would happen. I'd be more than happy to give it back to Dan in the Public Works Department. That would be great. I'd be more than happy to do it because really that cost is not so much for my staff to do anything. It is for the contractual. It's for Davy Trees, which is a contract because we don't have the staff, the personnel. The urban forester is coming out of my department. He's the one who's reviewing all the trees, making the recommendations for pruning, for removal, and for planting and things like that. And that does come out of my budget. And then in the forestry line in that fund is any tree that goes into the parks. So any work that's done in the parks comes out of that forestry line. So again, we can do it. Those are the pros and cons, the costs and everything else. And I apologize if we didn't explain that further.
What would you, did you want to say?
I would like clarification. On page 168 for Public Works, is it the forestry line item that you would like moved to Fund 50? The 10-401-6470?
Yes.
So it's the yes.
That would be
So they want Park and Stormwater to inherit that line item in and of itself. So.
That was my request last year. It may be a bad idea, but it was my request last year.
no,
And then I also have questions about that, but we're not.
No, right, but just
I mean,
for
I
my
also have questions about the
edification
line
that if
item,
it's-
like in future years. So I have separate questions.
Oops, sorry, did not mean to slam.
Yeah.
Can I answer the questions about future years? That might be the easier
Oh,
one.
yeah, the future years. So it really jumps up next year
Yeah.
compared to, or excuse me, in '26 compared to the projected in '25.
Yep, it's because the cusp of that budget is the pruning of each ward. So we're on that 4-year preventive maintenance. And so you'll see in '25, we're on Ward 4. It's our lowest ward. We only have 110 trees. We more than double that to 283 to Ward 1 that has the most trees. Actually, Ward 3 actually now has the most trees. So that's why you see the jump year after year. It's not a consistent because we track basically our current costs, the number of trees that we have that will need to be pruned. We throw in some miscellaneous for planting. We throw miscellaneous for emergency. Sometimes emergencies haven't had too many emergencies this year. Remember last year we had a lot of trees falling. So good or bad, we kind of keep that. So that's why you see the variation year after year. It's because which ward we're going to prune.
And I guess just to make sure I'm clear, the concern is that if your department, and I guess I'm just getting clarity from you, if the Parks Department is responsible for the street trees, then the budget should be in their budget, not split into Public Works budget to fund it, because Public Works has enough of their own things to also address too, right? It's just to clean up the line items and make
That
sure
was my
that-
intention last
Yeah.
year, was to clean up the line items. It's something managed by Parks. It ought to be in the
In Parks
Parks
budget.
budget. And
The other thing, just to answer one of your other questions, is there was times where fees and charges were getting funded to the general fund. That was because the Public Works Department was responsible for park maintenance. They ran the park maintenance department. Once again, in 2014, that moved back to Parks and Recreation, again, for various reasons. That's why that revenue came back, was to help pay for the things that we were not doing in-house. So our revenue went when.
If that doesn't change your mind,
No, I'm just-
I think you kind of made a motion, so is
I
there?
didn't hear a motion, but
Oh,
I'm
well.
just- are you in a position to walk us through the pros and cons of doing?
No, I mean, I can, I'm not.
I just don't, I'm not, what does that mean?
The easy thing is you just add more expenditures into Fund 50. Where is the room to cut? There's two places, to be completely honest. There is the capital. And so instead of having about $500,000 a year capital, which again, I'll explain later, we'd be down to about 400 to 250, depending on each year of tree maintenance. The other thing is, again, one of the reasons our capital budget's been lower is that transfer of funding into the Brentwood Park Maintenance and Liquidity Fund. You could reduce that. Like anything else, we know that the park's going to have some larger capital items in the future. And so that's why it's been my push for 3 or 4 years to kind of, we called it an endowment fund until then, but we were properly informed by the city attorney. It's not an endowment fund, it's a parks maintenance and liquidity fund. So that would be the easy way. I'd have to dive into it more, but top of my head, I know my budget's pretty darn well. Those would be the places we would cut to be able to then provide a balanced budget.
so, maybe this has been a bad idea, but I do think that we have some lean years coming. There are a lot of requests from all over, and we need to be thoughtful about where different things are funded. And this is something that your department manages, and it just seems odd that it's, there's this history. Well, something changed, and we took it over. And,
There's another meeting coming up. What you have before you is a balanced budget. How about you give us some time to revisit and see what it would look like for Stormwater Parks Improvement Fund to fund 100% of it, and then you can react to that. So we'll bring it back.
I'm happy to give it back to Public Works. I would love to do that. I'm not, I'm happy to do that too. I mean, we can work on that with Dan as well.
Dan just said he doesn't want it.
Yeah. Well, I think because we have so many parks with trees, we have the horticulturalist that's in your department. I mean, I feel like I know they're not an arborist, but they're the closest that we have, right?
Yeah,
There's probably some efficiencies there in that, maybe those folks can at least determine what needs to be done before we engage in the contractual, just calling Davy Tree Service. So I think it makes the most sense, but I would like to see how that plays out.
So for purposes of tonight, can we just back to, I'm kind of open to the idea, but this feels like it'd be on the fly, and that I'm not
Exactly,
open to.
exactly.
And if you could come back and.
Try and
we
update the
could have
presentation with, yeah,
that out, will
Yep.
that work at the next meeting?
happy to do so. Still want me to go on though? Finish
I
up.
didn't mean to cut you off. I just,
No,
you
not
were
at all.
there, so I asked.
That is the purpose of this meeting. So capital expenditures, sorry. Capital expenditures, these are what we have coming up for this year. None of them are, I think, when you look at capital, two things. One is we're really focused on the master plan, and without having the fully fled approved master plan, we're kind of looking at what we could do this year in '25, which was still kind of on the books, or bigger projects that we knew were coming down the pike, compared to things that we might know are going to rate high in the master plan. So obviously one was the new parking lot construction in Brentwood Park. That was something that was discussed. We still have year 2 of our Arboretum project, so that's just a little bit of money left over there. Our parking lot hasn't really been touched in my tenure. It's not in terrible shape. I think we can get by with a crack ceiling, seal coating, and striping. It's only $25,000. It kind of fit nicely into a year where we're trying to wait for the master plan to come through. The big one is the Hanley Park Comfort Station and parking lot expansion. We did the design for that a couple years ago. It was in the budget to start this year. It got cut for the parking lots, the temporary parking lots, and the design for the new parking lot. It is, I think, the next step for Hanley Park, mainly because that comfort station is not ADA accessible. The parking lot is undersized for what's in there now. And what we do is combine the pavilion that's kind of old with the unaccessible comfort station, and then be able to expand the parking lot. So that's what that project is. The idea is splitting it over 2 fiscal years because we want to start in the fall anyway. And then secondarily, it's just that we don't have enough funding to do a project like this together. We could separate it. We could do one year and wait another couple years and do the other. It's just there's efficiencies for doing both. You're going to be on there demoing both of them. And then if we can do that, then you can just have that same contractor come in and expand the parking lot. That's why it's there. We have applied for a grant. That grant is a $410,000 grant, so it would be roughly 40% of the total cost. Knock on wood. We're right on the verge of getting it or not getting it. If we don't get it, we'd have to defer that project another year anyway because we wouldn't have the funding for it. As I said, the question about the funding, when you looked at this year and next year, a lot of it's due to the fact that we have somewhere about about $800,000, $900,000 in capital funding each year. That has been cut into because of salaries. We've talked about that. That's been cut into a little bit because of the Brentwood Park maintenance and liquidity reserve. I have to keep remembering the right way of saying it. So that cuts into a little bit of that as well. And then when you see larger years, because we have grant funding available for it. So next year we have some funding coming in from the Brentwood, the Arboretum from Deer Creek Watershed Alliance. We have money coming in from MSD for that project as well, as we've talked about in the past. The following years, the increase with the grant. I don't like to budget expenditures hoping to get grants. I feel pretty confident in everything we've gotten moving up. The one that I'm most nervous about is, again, that Hanley Park one. So that's kind of where we're at. With that as well, we would be, with the capital budget, we'd be looking at kind of redoing our capital plan next year with the new master plan. We put that into the for every year, we rescore things. Sometimes projects move up or down. Primarily if they move up because of funding. We have funding for it, so that gives them a higher score, moves them up. And other things kind of move down. So that's kind of.
Your microphone's cutting out a little bit. Maybe move it to the.
Mic for a second. So that's kind of where with that. The one thing I didn't want the questions, so I didn't want to talk about a little bit.
Can I just ask about some of the capital projects? So I guess the biggest concern that I have when we look at the budget for next year, not that I don't believe in some of these initiatives that you have listed here, but we haven't seen the master plan. So we really don't know we haven't approved it. We haven't, vetted it. We don't know what the priorities really are from a resident standpoint. I know quite a few residents have talked to me about sports complex being a big part of there and the programming that goes on down there. I don't see anything in here that relates to the sports complex, the potential of a rec center renovation long-term, because certainly if we're going to do something like that, we'd probably start designing and doing some at least some exploratories on it. There's nothing in the 5-year plan that includes any of that. Even budgeting for next year, like the Hanley Park Comfort Station, I know in the process of the Parks Master Plan, there was discussions, do we put an additional dedicated, pickleball court just a little bit off of where the existing thing is? If we got a larger or even a dog park renovation, if we've got a footprint that has several projects that could be efficiently bundled because there's going to be construction, rather than tearing up different parts, every couple of years, I would like to at least have that vision of it before we start agreeing to a budget and allocating some money for projects until we understand what that's going to be.
That's what makes putting a 5-year capital plan together this year difficult.
Yeah.
Because we don't have that out. I can tell you, because I've seen the master plan, I know it's about ready to come down. Both the Hanley Park and Mount Calvary are both listed as priority projects and kind of getting those things ready. So the Hanley Park's the easier one because we do have design. The design's done. We did it last year. It's ready to go. That's why you see Mount Calvary is design. And we're going to have to have a conversation what that is. We're not going to be able to do everything all at once because we just won't have the funding available. So even Hanley Park does have 2 additional pickleball courts in there. They're on the other side of what is the basketball court.
Right.
And they do have hopefully expansion of the dog park going into, ultimately into property we don't currently own.
Right.
And so both of those, while they're great, we couldn't package all 4 of those together because one, there's not quite the efficiency because you're having the main area in the front, then you have to go all the way over there, and then you have to go all the way over there to do each of the other ones. Also, court construction is a lot different contractor than it is a pavilion. People specialize in court construction, so you'd have, they'd have to sub out that to someone else, which actually raise costs.
Understood.
And ultimately, it comes down to dollars. We just don't have the dollars to do all those all at once. And that's what's going to happen with Mount Calvary. Mount Calvary, we're going to have to come to a consensus with Public Works, with the community on what the design should be. And then we're going to have to take which one we think is going to be the best one to start. I have personal ideas, but I think some of it will depend on everyone else. I mean, I think we ultimately have to get the water situation handled first, and we have to kind of get the whole park laid out in a place where we can then start construction on top of that. So, yeah, I mean, those are all the things we're thinking about. I have my own capital plan. I have my own scoring sheet, and I throw everything in there every year and I rescore. That's why you'll see some of my projects move up and down. And that's because I feel like capital is one of the most important things that I do. My job is to provide facilities and services for the residents, and the best way to do that is through capital, through facilities. And so I'm excited about the opportunity of creating that new capital plan. I didn't want to rush it this year because it's not ready.
Understood.
You guys haven't approved it. But I'll tell you, something like the sports complex, that is probably going to be a multi-year discussion because
Of course.
we have to decide if we like one option over the other. And then we have to engineer to see if the option we like is feasible and going to work. And then we're going to have to kind of then plan for a large capital expenditure. So those are all the things we think about year after year when we put together our budget. Excuse me. Sorry.
So, but as it relates to the budget for next year, where would, even just, where would I find would it just be in general park maintenance for things like the sports complex and making sure that, that some of the costs that we know are ongoing with that?
I mean, any expenditure related to which is in the park maintenance line because it is their program. For funding every year for your basics, your sand to kind of infill with your infield, all filled dirt, all the things you need just to run a business. But we also have line when we try to go in and relieve that action we get after Brentwood days. And so all that, unfortunately, is in the park maintenance. In 2 lines, it'd be under miscellaneous supplies. Miscellaneous contractual and materials and supplies.
Okay.
Sorry.
So I guess what I'm hearing is that you don't anticipate by 2029 any things like any bigger projects like I just want to get to a point where we're not being surprised by something that gets dropped in there 2 years from now when we when we're looking at a budget or trying to anticipate what the budget would be, decisions that we might need to make this year that, and how they impact the decisions down the road, that then all of a sudden, 2 years from now, we've got a $4 million,
All my
idea
capital- all
on the
my
table.
capital decisions are based on the funding that I have available for capital for that year. And then we reevaluate year after year. I'll never say that I won't surprise you with something, because that just puts me in a corner.
Yeah.
But what I won't do, what I try not to do, is say, next year in 2025, come in, you've approved my capital, then all of a sudden say, hey, actually, I need $1 million for this. One, I know I don't have $1 million, and two, if I needed something that quickly, I should be ready. Off the top of my head, the only thing that could really throw a wrinkle would be the Magic Bus. The Magic Bus still meets our criteria, which is great. It's getting a new transmission today. But that is in my 3-year plan, because we think that's where it will score out after talking to Dan and Eric about where it's at in its current place. So, yeah, I mean, we look
And
at
it's
those,
getting used a lot more because of the senior programming increases.
and so we look at those things, like I said, on a yearly basis, and we adjust when things happen, when things come up. And this year's a good example. The temporary parking lots, the design or construction for those, designed for the new one, that basically we said how we're going to pay for it. We pushed this project, the Hanley Park project, back to this calendar year. So anything I do comes with a reaction of having to move something else out. So.
Okay, thank you. And the last question that I had, I think last year it was included in capital for parks, but the stormwater projects to address the, the priorities outlined in the stormwater master plan. I don't think it's plan, but whatever it is.
Yeah, so we had, and don't quote me on the dollar amounts.
It was like 180, or 144,000.
What you will see
is what we have projected for OMCI potentially every year with Prop S. And we allocated some money for the, I guess, bidding of 4 projects potentially to get done. I didn't see anything in the capital budget or plan. There was $0 for stormwater projects, so.
Because that comes out of a different line. That comes out of, it's its own, it's its own line, it's its own stormwater line.
Oh, okay.
And it is, $5710-6480 stormwater expenses.
What page are you on?
Sorry, I was looking at my own budget thing.
Oh.
Well, give me a second, I'll get you there. Should be page 216, thank you.
Okay.
5010-6480.
We're not budgeting anything next year because we are, and Dan can speak to this better. Dan, why don't you come up, because we discussed this. We're completing the first group of projects this year.
That 180 that we'd set aside for that.
And Dan can confirm the dollar amount. We're starting it, and we will get reimbursed for next year. We're hopeful that it will be completed this year. Otherwise, if it's not, then we would come before the board for a budget amendment. But, so there's I'll let Dan finish it.
Yeah, the Prop S money, MSD will start collecting it next year, but we won't actually receive it until 2026. So the idea was you would let it build up. It'll be $75,000. So they also said you could do the project. First, you got to get approval through them, obviously, but you could do a project and then reimburse yourself early on in 26. So you don't have to wait another whole year or anything. You could just, and we did look at some. There's 6 that are in the bid package 1. I looked at another 3. I just went down the list of which ones we could afford, and it was like $228,000 for 3 more projects on that master list that Gonzalez prepared. The next one in priority was way too high. It was on Pine Avenue. It was like pushing 500,000.
Yeah, that one's going to be its own. You have to build it up pretty good to get that one done.
And typically what you'll see in my budget is the revenue coming in, expenditures going out. I know if we're bringing in money from OCMI, if we're bringing in money somewhere else, that's tagged for those expenditures. If we don't use those, the finance department will add those dollars into that reserve, the stormwater reserve. So that's building up that stormwater reserve for a future project.
Okay, yeah, and that made sense. I think it's because it moved to a different line item that I didn't see it before, that it was zero now, but
Understandable.
no projections later, so thank you. It's clarified.
Any other questions about capital? Yeah, so the last thing is fleet. And so really one of the things that, again, is a goal of 2025 is really to develop an electric fleet program, replacement plan that not only recommends replacement of fleet with electric vehicles, but also really works on how we work with infrastructure. So we did put in a request for a truck this year, and it's an internal combustion engine. We did for a couple reasons. One is the cost. We talked about how small our capital funding is becoming, and so it was tough to be able to fit in not only the cost of the electric vehicle, which we got a bid for, or quote for, which would be about $58,000, so it's $23,000 more, but also another $20,000 for that charger. And then if we did have the funding for the charger, there's operational challenges. If we talked about, one is we don't want to put it in the current garage because that'd be a waste of money. We're moving there, in a little bit. Two is the future garage. We can put it there. But the concern there, since we haven't done the design of the new facility, put in a place that unfortunately then affects what we may want to do or could do. I don't want to put us in that position. Also, just the terrible job, but our thought process is those would be in the back of the building, so it's not going to be front facing. So even if we put one near the back or the side, that's going to be in a position that's not easily secured. We're not going to have a fence like we do for our current yard. We're not going to have cameras on that yet. And so my concern is what happens with a vehicle that sits there 16 hours a day. Hopefully, being catty-cornered to the police station would be a deterrent. But I think what I hear from Chief more and more is that people are more and more risky these days. And so that was one of the reasons we recommended against it. And also just the logistics of getting people from our shop to a vehicle, whether it's at the new facility or the rec complex. We did consider maybe saying, hey, maybe we can move the Equinox up because that is a rec vehicle and that is one that could be charged in the facility. But to be blunt, it's nowhere close to meeting the replacement. It doesn't have enough years or miles to even make it worth a consideration. And then, so that was kind of on the forefront. Our staff believes they will be more efficient with this vehicle. There's some merit to say, look, maybe we don't do it until we figure out operational. So we've lived without this truck. We could live without it for another year or two if that's what we decide is the best thing to do. But those are the reasons why we made that recommendation. And again, the whole idea of figuring out the plan is really the focus is going to be the infrastructure of how we get chargers in positions for when we do electrify our fleet. I am a big believer of electrifying the fleet. My staff, not quite as much as me, but they're coming along. That's the good news. And we already do have, we have multiple electric equipment. We have electric mowers, we have electric gators, and so we are already moving toward that, and it's something we want to continue to do. So if it's, if efficiently we'd be better with the vehicle, if we operationally want to wait until we're ready for electric, you're not going to get an argument out of me. That's not what I'm going to fall on the sword for. I'll go back to Public Works taking over trees. But that's it. That's our new sign at Brentwood Park. Hopefully you guys have seen it. It is beautiful. So drive by there tonight, see if it's lit up yet. If not, we'll have a meeting tomorrow to figure out what we need to do. So, yeah.
Forum.
So I have a question about the truck. At some point, we need to move forward with this. I keep hearing about transmissions that get replaced and engines that have issues. You don't have that with an electric vehicle, so it may cost more in the upfront, which impacts our capital budget, but the operating expenses for these cars is much less. And this car in particular, it seems like it could be charged with a 240 because it's not, it's sitting overnight. So it doesn't need a $20,000 charger because it can plug in overnight. It isn't like the police cars that are used 24/7, that's a whole different situation. But, and that's not, I mean, that.
No, that's a good point. When we're thinking about chargers, we're thinking about not a DC, that's a super fast, but just a level 2 charger. That's what that cost was. I would have to just let me double check with staff who did the research, but I think you're right. We probably could do with a regular charger. Then it's that upfront cost. Again, don't hold me to this. The easiest thing to do would be defer the parking lot maintenance for another year. The center parking lot, this crack ceiling, because that's about the cost of what I would need to bump that up. That would be my recommendation if that's what we want to do. Make sure that a 240 outlet is what we're currently running our mowers on and our gators on. So it would probably take a little bit of contractual cost, but not much. Yeah. I could easily take out one, add up the cost of another, and start the process. I would not be opposed to that.
I'd like to see that.
I mean, I think that sounds, I would be in support of that.
Great.
Great.
I'll add that to my presentation for next time. Great.
Just, I didn't want to forget, I said I'm a woman of my word. If there are aldermen in the gallery who'd like to ask questions, go for it. Just come up to the microphone. Alderman Weggie, would you come up to the microphone?
Brandon Weggie, 8537 Douglas Court. So one thing is on the parking lot. Like, I know we're doing a study to kind of get that design locked in, but I don't feel like we've ever made the decision on adding another parking lot down at Brentwood Park. And, you know, I can see the logic of budgeting it in case we make that decision at some point, but it seems like a pretty big ticket item that if I had the bet, you know, we're not going to want to do at the end of the day. Because I feel like the parking seems resolved, the overflow lots are not full all the time, and it just seems to be working out okay. I mean, we had a big party down at Brentwood Park last weekend, and plenty of parking. We didn't even use the 2 like reserve spots because there were enough open spots closer that was fine. So I just have a feeling that one's going to fall off. So that might be another opportunity to think about. But again, I do understand having it in the budget, but I don't want to have the budget be like, hey, we approved this, we're going to go forward with it either way because it's $400,000 for 36 spots. On the EV chargers, I mean, on the Ameren analysis, we were predicted to save net present values between $10,000 and $42,000. That includes the additional cost. On the charging thing, that $20,000 is not necessary. If you have a 240 line, you can get a Grizzly charger for $300, right? It just charges in. You don't even have to unplug it, right? You can get a junction and it's charging one or the other. It's not going to be customer facing at all. It's somewhere. I think the savings on this would be significant. Because we don't understand this as a community, I think it's important to take a small step before we fully electrify so people start seeing the value of this. And I think you'll find, you know, it could power the bandstands and things like that because there's a lot of cool like capability that come with these things. And I'm just curious, what internal combustion engine truck is $35,000?
A contract.
Is that a
F-150, yep.
Okay, 'cause that's
Yeah, right.
Well,
I'll take 2.
Again, that's the state contract. Yep.
okay.
No,
And that's an excellent point on the 240. And to be honest, when I'm thinking about making sure that we have in the future, that's why I was thinking the level 2. But for a test run to run a 240, we could do that at the garage now, and even that cost wouldn't be terrible if we move in a couple of years.
And honestly, the Ameren analysis had all the mileage on there, and the mileage you're seeing per day,
We will.
it would refill.
We'll have from 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the afternoon to 7 o'clock the next morning.
You're doing 24 miles, that's 8 hours.
No, again, I apologize for not thinking about the 240.
I'm glad Brandon brought up the parking lot. I mean, I had that as a circled item in my notes, but it is a pretty big expense, and I just want to make sure that yes, it's something that we think might be needed, but at the same time, pretty soon, hopefully in the end of the month or so, the signalized crossing is going to be open. We'll have access to more parking on Russell. I agree, I don't see as many parking issues now that those temporary lots are up, and as we continue to maybe consider, is there some potential for any of that to be redeveloped? You know, I don't know that we need to spend $400,000 on a lot that may be not necessary.
Obviously, we would not do anything without bringing it to Public
Right.
Works for discussion first. That is first and foremost. While the budget is the budget, it always comes with the
And was that cost, because we did agree to have designs done, was that cost based on the designs that?
Yes,
Okay.
the cost is based on the cost estimate I received from Jacobs, who's doing design right now, finishing up design right now. So they're wrapping that up. Hopefully we'll have it in the next month or two.
Okay.
Big thing with the park is, to be honest, our two biggest complaints are parking and when we shut down the water feature for the fall. That was the first 4-star review we got for anything besides parking, and it broke our marketer's heart. But I think the temporary lots are great. They are working, they're doing a job. I will also tell you that as you do bigger things, bigger events, and do the things that we're wanting to do in that park, people are going to be, the people who are coming from outside of Brentwood will not be going to those temporary parking lots. I think those temporary parking lots have become the mid-county lot. Maplewood, Richmond Heights, Clayton, they all know it's easier to park there. You're still a 2-minute walk from the playground. You don't have to deal with the mess. The people coming from outside the area, and we have become a regional park, which is what is great, are plugging in 2984 Brazil, and it's telling them to go right to that parking lot. So it would be, I mean, doesn't mean that we have to do it like you guys said, but that's why we left it in there.
Okay, yeah, I'm just doing some quick math.
Well, and then,
10,000,
yeah, it's
almost
like
$11,000
it's like
per parking space. It's a lot.
Yeah, no, I'll add to that I think it's a crazy expensive parking lot, and I think we really need to look at it, but I'm also really anxious to see the Parks Master Plan, because we've talked to Public Works about some interesting other things that could be in the park, and if we did, I mean, we decided to hold off, but if you did have some sort of a beer garden or other thing that would draw different people, then we are going to need to figure out something to do with parking. So I like the fact that it's in the budget and we have the ability to talk about it at Public Works.
I can reduce that cost. The reason it's that high is because we're going permeable pavers like the other lot. That is a large part of that expense. But it's also green, sustainable. So
Also $11,000 per parking space.
I understand. I understand. If I could reduce that cost, I would, but I'm not a contractor. I should be a contractor. I made bad life choices.
Questions? Parks and Rec.
As we talk about the electrical vehicles and as I look at the utilities expense here, it's definitely one of the larger expenses. Have there ever been any conversations about using solar panels to fund any of this? Obviously, it'd be more of a upfront cost and investment, but you know, over the long term, once you add these up, 5-10 years, you know, you're talking $500,000 to $1 million in savings. It's my first year on Ways and Means, so I don't know if there's been discussions before or if we even have some, but I thought it was worth mentioning, not only for Public Works, but fire, you know, police, city hall, all buildings that we have. So just wanted to throw it out there.
Yeah, I mean, the simple answer is we are looking at that. The Sustainability Commission did an energy audit of all our facilities. And to be honest, the only two that made sense putting solar on rooftops were the Parks Department and I think it was police. The shape of the fire department's roof isn't good, and our current roof here has tons of issues. What it does not, the payback is about 20 years on the parks of the building. It won't pay for everything up front, but you'd see the reduction, so then you then see some of that change. And it's something we're looking at. We continue to look at grants and things for that. Until I feel confident in a grant, I'm not going to make that recommendation because that is a very large upfront cost. And the deterrent of that is the Infrastructure Reduction Act. There's funding in there for at least one more year, and we'll know, they say, by the end of this year if they're going to continue that in 25 or 26, and that would be the real question. Can we continue? If that continues, that's a decent chunk of it. So
something to monitor too. Obviously, as the technology gets better, costs are going to come down. Something to stay on.
Yep. The solar panels at the vent pavilion are still taking care of all the electricity in Brentwood Park.
Okay, any other questions for Parks and Rec? Great, thank you, Eric. So next up, we've got, I guess, Brentwood Bound, or
I can do that one.
that I'm.
Yeah, is there anything?
It's real short.
I'm not Ron Burgundy, but it's on the topic.
And I'm sorry, I was actually supposed to talk about that. That was supposed to be my big finisher. You will not see Brentwood Bound in the budget because Brentwood Bound is done. So I am as excited about that as anyone. We are excited that if you've driven down Brentwood Boulevard, you'll see the lights are at least installed. We're waiting for Union Pacific to have a signal meeting, which is next Tuesday, when we'll actually get the finalized date of when we'll be able to turn everything on. We're still hoping it's going to be in October, and that means that hopefully October, middle of November, one, that project's done. Two, that last bit of grant funding from different grants and the municipal park grant, we can bring those in and have this project all wrapped up in 2024. That is the update.
And that includes the trail connector?
Yep.
Right? Awesome.
Sure does.
That's great. All right, thank you. Next up, Public Works.
On the main screen, or is it on our flash drive? Working on my side. There we go. All right, where's page down? There we go. I'll just start with the accomplishments. So quite a few things we purchased this year with the FEMA capital projects purchases. So we got a sanitation truck, 2 dump trucks, a backhoe, a crack sealer trailer. We did the demolition of 2818 Breckenridge Industrial, which was the former Bowser House. The HVAC, which you've heard running several times tonight, that's all new. So thank you for that. The City Hall roof, that's to be determined. So it should be somewhere either late October, early November when that gets started. And then most importantly, the street sweeper, which you see a picture of there in our garage. And then down below is the crack sealer. We also, as a group, purchased the land and building at 288, which is the former Pitney Bowes building. That'll be for the Public Works Parks campus, which we already talked about a little bit. We completed mill and overlay with new asphalt on McKnight from Litzinger to York. And then we completed other capital, which would include the generator fuel tank at the PD. We bought a tire balancer at Public Works, and in replacement of dump truck number 75. We're continuing work on Russell at Brentwood, as Eric alluded to. So that intersection is coming along. New sidewalks on Russell Avenue. We put in some street lights on Brazos closer to the park. And then we get the meeting next week, and then hopefully by November, everything's working. Other accomplishments, I just put, we installed more than 600 linear feet of sidewalks using conventional methods. And then we partnered with parks, and that included structural soil. So those are still ongoing. I know we haven't poured areas yet, but I know Badger Daylighting has removed soil around the roots and put in the structural fills. So that's going to be done real soon. We completed some slabs in Hanley Industrial Park with our own staff, just purchased material after we ripped them out. And then there's about 34 sewer laterals. That's probably going to go up a little bit. It usually spikes in November, December when people tend to use their system more aggressively with holiday cooking. Picture over on the right is the Bowser House being demolished. So it is gone. Work in progress for 2024. So I still have to put up a speed cushion. It's already been approved by Public Safety, so that's high school near Powell. We're working with Castle on that phase 2 repair of the slope failure at Hanley Park. So I know that the MSP permit was approved, so Castle was going to pick that up, and then we'll figure out the next steps in that process. Bid package 1 we talked about earlier in the meeting. That would be for the stormwater master plan. So bid package 1. I have the addresses listed here for fiscal year 2024. There's 6 projects. You can read them if you want, or I don't want to belabor you with reading them out to you. Fiscal year 2025, as we mentioned, there's no projects in the design phase, but we have OMCI money. We haven't blown through all of it. It accrues, so there is a balance there if we needed to move something up. And what we were talking about was actually doing something in 2026 because, as we mentioned, you'll get your Fund S, the $75,000, plus the OMCI. They did agree to turn it back on. I have to send a letter of intent by November 1st, but it's a fourth. It's not as much as it was, but it's still something that we're going to take it all away and you'd be left with $75,000. So I'm thrilled that we have 2 funds to draw through. But those 3 projects that I listed here in 26, which are next in the priority list, it's around $228,000. And then going to the budget book, streets, my staffing's the same, 15 full-time employees. You'll see the largest increases, salaries, employee benefits, but that's due to the compensation plan. So I put those just because they are the largest increases. We've already talked about forestry, and Eric explained why that's decreased is because you only have like 110 trees for Ward 4. On the capital side for us, we have repairs and maintenance. That's for fleet and equipment. So if the ice surfacer, if a cart tipper breaks, if a side-by-side doesn't run, it's for either parts, labor, or both, to fix that. So that's what that line's about. Under computers, the largest jump for us as well was the printer. That's $11,000. We only have one large one that everybody uses between parks and us. Capital improvements, this 6530 line, we wanted to get a second car tipper. So the FEMA truck that we did get has a single tipper on the back. All of our other trucks have dual tippers, but to get it in time to close the loop with that, we just bought one that was already made up with a single. We wanted the duplex, so if one fails, you've got another one, or if you put 2 helpers, you can empty simultaneously and just move up the street. So that's what that's about. Again, another FEMA purchase we had already made up, but it didn't come with the equipment. You'd have to send it out to Napide to have it outfitted. The plow truck, or what we want to use as a plow truck, doesn't have a plow blade, doesn't have the spreader, but we do have a dump truck that we can use as a dump truck. So we can send it out for outfitting next year if this capital item is approved, and then we'll have another plow truck as well as a dump truck when it's no longer needed for plowing. And then other capital that we always try to include money for would be if there's other speed cushions, street signs, of course, if there's any other tasks that fall underneath that category. And then sidewalks and streets is the 6535. That's where like your McKnight Road came out of. The next big project for next year would be Rose Avenue Bridge. That concrete deck is over 20 years old, and we've epoxied it in areas that we can do. And I know it was in the bridge recommendation that MoDOT does every other year that you should really consider replacing that. But that total for 6535 is $309,000. And then Rose Avenue Bridge is actually 225 out of the 309. So the 309 is a big number, but of that 309, 225 is just for that bridge deck. And then as I mentioned in here, the last time it was inspected, it's every other year, it's November of 23, so it'll be coming up November of 25. And if you score too low, you run the risk of them shutting it down, because it would be unsafe. But right now it's perfectly safe. They did recommend hydro demolition and a dense concrete overlay. So, that's the engineering speak that I threw in there. But basically you would remove that concrete, put new concrete there. You can see in the picture in the upper right, there's areas that are like a different discolored area. That's the epoxy that we've had to like fill in where that joint is. And there's a big area that's bald, basically that top surface pulled away. And then other things that we included in that budget line would be Manderley Drive. There's a retaining wall that's leaning. That's one of those city paths that goes between Manderley and Hilldale. The initial estimate was really high. We're working with others to get that lower so we can actually get this done next year. And then just to point out, there's no vehicles that I've scheduled in 25. We purchased 3 and 3 dump trucks, and then we got the sanitation truck. So I'm good. I would take more, but don't want to be greedy. And then sanitation, that didn't change, still 4 full-time employees. And then the largest increases there, of course, would be your salaries, your overtime, your benefits, and a lot of that's attributed to the compensation program. Solid waste disposal, we did bump up just slightly, $10,000. It's about 4%. And that's to dispose of your refuse, your yard waste, and then process your recyclables. That has gone up a little bit year over year. We keep a history. I think I go back 10 years now, 9 or 10. But we've seen it go up just a little bit. Recycling's one of those things that's actually kind of leveled out. It hasn't increased like we were seeing, 3 or 4 years ago. And then lastly, the capital 6554, that subcategory, that's still the same, $7,000. So that'll buy you a dumpster like you see on the right, like over at the rec center or anywhere that we have city-owned facilities, the composters and the pails, and then recycle carts, which we provide to people free of charge. Sewer lateral, as Bola mentioned before, that really hasn't changed. It's still $3,500 per calendar year per property owner. That's what the maximum is that the city would reimburse on qualified defects that are outside the home. We don't do anything on the inside or through the wall. The miscellaneous contractual expenses, that's remained flat at $126,000. Capital and the streets and sidewalks is just $1,000. So that would be like, we've got our own sewer reel camera in case we have to use it somewhere. If there's a sinkhole and we want to look into it, we've got that capability. The other $1,000 was just if there's a sidewalk or a street that's damaged as a result of digging down and replacing the sewer lateral, we carry money there that we typically use each year. And then lastly, just to point out, the revenues are basically flat because the maximum by state statute is still $50 per property. And in the case of some Brentwood Forest Condo Association properties, theirs could be $25. And then some they pay zero and they get zero benefit, which, we've got a list that's on the city's website. And that's pretty much it. I didn't have a cool sign or anything, so I put Carl the Beagle in my basement, so. He's very happy to be here.
Well, I have one question, and it's probably something that ought to get transferred to the Public Works for discussion, potentially. But I was surprised to read that there were staffing issues in the budget, and I wasn't aware of the staffing issues. And so I guess maybe Bola said there's only one vacancy in your department. So are you comfortable that with the new compensation plan that vacancies will decrease?
Yeah, part of the reason why we had to use some part-time help was because we had some injuries too. People on light duty that normally, it's pretty physically demanding whether you're filling a pothole or even putting up a sign. If they can't lift more than 10 pounds above waist level, or they can't use one arm because of shoulder injury, we can put them on light duty if we have light duty, but I can't put you on trash. So we had like a perfect storm where several people were out, and then we used the temp to do trash just because we had to cover trash.
Okay. So how often, I was also at the employee luncheon the other day and heard that sometimes the other staff help out with trash. Does that happen often? And
Every week, I mean, you've got either somebody sick or you've got like Mondays are the heaviest, so we usually supplement like 1 or 2 people from Public Works if we can. You know, it's not a given. And then that's pretty much it. If it gets heavy with leaf pickup on Wednesdays, then we would probably send 1 person over there as well. Just so they're not running the trucks so late that then they can't empty because the dump's closed.
Okay.
Because if you got leaves in there, you obviously can't go pick up recycling the next day with the same truck. You got to figure out, sometimes we've had to go back to the yard and push out a small load and then pick it up later and then put it in the truck.
so just as we think about the cost of trash, you know, the cost of those employees working on the trash truck probably ought to be something that we think about as being a cost of our sanitation program. If we really think about, you know, evaluating that, I don't think we're going to be rid of it anytime soon, but it actually does increase the cost of it beyond, you know, what's actually here.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we did that in an RFP years ago, and when we sent it out to see if consider privatization and, you know, brought it back to Public Works.
That was the only question.
I've got a couple of questions. One, I just thought of tonight as we were talking about the Rose Avenue Bridge, is that what it's called? Is this demoing the whole bridge or just the top
The deck,
structure?
yeah, top
Just the deck?
structure,
Okay.
yes.
So, and the deterioration, you don't feel that the deck is deteriorating faster because of flooding that might be happening
No,
along
typically
there?
it's just from your salting and stuff like
Okay.
that, and just wear and tear. I don't know. I've never put the data collector up there, but I would assume it's, you know, 1,500, 2,000 vehicles.
It gets a lot of traffic, I'm sure, people cutting through.
Especially if you know that that's a simpler way to go instead of going all the way up to Eager Road. And, yeah, Oakley. Yeah.
Yep, quiet.
Never mind. Yeah.
Okay, I just didn't know if it was a case where we needed to look at a bigger bridge design, raising
Yeah,
it
they've looked at
up,
the girders
but-
and there was only one that they noted and it might need like, I guess, to be adjusted underneath, but the structures themselves, the actual beams underneath, they're fine.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, it's just the deck that they were concerned with, but, you know, to remove that concrete and
No, I know.
put forms and put new concrete is super expensive. Because we did get a quote for it and it's like, well, we'll have to do, you know, an RFP and see who's interested in it.
Right, no, I just wanted to make sure that wasn't going to be something that we're going to end up kind of falling into down the road if we're going to put a new surface on top and then in 10 years we find out we have to demo the whole thing and put a new one up. You know, it seems like I'd like to know the lifespan of the entire structure and
Right,
whether
yeah.
or not it contributes to any potential flooding, like we saw with Breckenridge Industrial before we raised it, and, you know, where the water would hit a certain level and then back up.
Yeah, I don't think we.
I don't
have to refer
know
to-
that there's an issue
yeah.
there, I'm just asking, you know.
Yeah, I don't know if police or fire have ever had that bridge closed. I mean, I don't recall in my 8 years we've ever had to put barricades up to keep people from using roads because of high water.
Okay.
Breckenridge Industrial for sure.
Yeah.
Suburban tracks, you know, Hanley, Brentwood.
Right. And the other question that I had was related to just looking back at your projections for streets, and I've, you know, street projects and sealants, I know we tend to continue to kick the can down the road on those a lot. That seems to be the first thing that goes when we decide we need to find money somewhere. Last year, we had a projection of 2027 for, you know, $500,000. In 2028, $634 million, or I'm sorry, $1,000, not million. But then this year, it's you know, your projections in the 5-year capital, and I'm on page 183, by the way. You know, we didn't have any, I don't think, projected last year for streets, you know, I'm sorry, this is sealants. It just seems like this has changed quite a bit from where we were last year when we were looking at the budget.
It has, some of those have aged out, so typically you don't put a sealant on once the street's more than 7 years old. So if you recall, 2015, 16, 17, there were big pockets of streets that were done all as mill and overlay.
Right.
So the ones that were 15s, I can't consider those are, 9 years old. And then there'll be 10 next year. Fell off because of COVID, it kind of threw the cycle off. So I know we did him, last year we did some sealants. This year we don't have any sealants. I put together a spreadsheet and I did 5 years worth of street evaluations. And I know in 27 is when we would start sealing again on the streets that were 7 years old or newer.
Okay.
So, and then I'll have to reevaluate all of it again just because of all the stuff that Missouri American's doing. So I'm like, well, if something was on the list to be sealed, I wouldn't necessarily seal it if they cut away half of the road.
Of it already, yeah.
So like Mary, Kentland, Covington, those streets, they had pavement work done to them, but now they're being, torn apart and then put back together. And I know Joseph was one of those too. We brought it to Public Works where half of it was repaved from the center line to the curb. The other half is 7 years old. So it's like, I'm not going to seal that even though it's at 7 years because the other half is new. I'm like, I'll wait till the others deteriorates a little more and then probably do a mill and overlay on the whole width.
Okay, okay. So the change in numbers year over year is just accounting for those adjustments?
Right, we weren't
because we
doing-
had some pretty big numbers in the other budget.
Yeah, and we were trying to do stuff in Hanley Industrial that we couldn't do in-house. So those would be like in 2026 and then some in 27 and 28. But we tried to balance it, like do the sealants as best we could and then do some of these in Hanley Industrial because it's a big commercial area. And those, just the weight of the vehicles driving through there, I think has something to do with the deterioration.
I just wanted to make sure that we weren't lowering some of these numbers in the projected to sort of make something work somewhere else.
Yeah, if they aged out, I didn't even consider it. It's like, well, if I put sealant over something that's 9 years old, it's probably going to peel away in 4 or 5 years, and then I kind of, missed my opportunity. So it's like it'll have to wait until we mill and overlay. We've got a new crack sealer, and we'll just keep filling cracks and sealing it as best we can. And and we can spot repair stuff too. So that's what we did over on Eager Road, like west of Brentwood Boulevard, like near Bobolink. So we have our own milling machine. We milled out an area where the seams were opening up, and then we brought hot mix in there and rented a roller and rolled it into place.
Okay.
So that's what I kind of expect to do on some of these asphalt streets if they fail and they're not quite ready to be milled and overlaid.
All right, and the last thing I have is in the budget book last year, we had a creek and trail maintenance, and I don't seem to see that in there. Is that moved to some other part of the?
It's under Fund 50, right?
I don't have, sorry, I did not bring my budget book up here. There is a line in there, but the funding is for this year to complete the repairs on Lewin Trail.
Right.
That is a FEMA project, so the revenue will be going right back into Fund 40 that is coming out of Fund 40.
Okay.
So I don't remember the exact line item.
I just know that in the Public Works Committee, we've talked about maybe some budgeting for some ongoing maintenance that hopefully would be reimbursed by FEMA as a proactive, like cleaning the creeks out a little bit and things like that. But I just want to make sure that we account for that.
As far as proactive stuff, that's not any, FEMA would not reimburse us for any
Have
of
to be a
that work.
disaster.
Oh, I thought there was a mitigation.
There was a mitigation as part of if you wanted to take some of your current projects and mitigate them for future, but it was a 60-40 repayment instead of the.
Okay.
So it was more beneficial to do the full repair than try to do a mitigation project.
Okay, all right. I guess the question that I have related to, and maybe that's in your parks budget somewhere, related to ongoing maintenance with the creeks, is we'd like to make sure that we did all this work clearing out of Black Creek and clearing out of Deer Creek and areas that weren't part of the Brentwood Bound project. What is our plan moving forward to make sure we're maintaining that so it doesn't get back to choke points and flooding?
That would be in Public Works budget.
Yeah.
So I'll step away from
All
that.
right, you can step away because it doesn't have to do with street trees, so. These are creek trees. So I guess the question is, Dan, is do you have a place in the budget for that? Obviously, next year we don't need it because it's still fresh with all of the work that we just have
Yeah, we
done
only
over the past
cleaned
2 years, but.
Litzinger going south to Manchester, but if you'd want to do like.
Black Creek, I think
Yeah,
Black
Black
Creek,
Creek, yeah.
for sure,
We did do
looking
some
at
of, Deer
projections
Creek.
for what those costs might be, because we know if we don't stay on it, it'll just get back to what it was. And then I think the part of Deer Creek from the lumber yard to the Brentwood bound flood mitigation area, we cleaned that out a lot, and I think it's made a big difference. We haven't had as severe a flooding with sports complex and knock on wood. And we haven't had businesses and residents that had serious flooding on Black Creek like we've had. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that we kept it clear. So I want to make sure we're budgeting long-term for that.
I know the simple cleaning we were gonna do this winter, we haven't done it in a few years, but once the ground's frozen, we're looking for winter work. We've already got a winch and chainsaws and stuff like that, and chaps and all the PPE, but go in around Rose Avenue Bridge is what we thought. The loose stuff like shopping carts,
Agreed,
tires,
yeah.
anything that's down there, there's a gate on the one side of Rose and a little bit of concrete. We figure we take the equipment down there like we did years ago, pick everything up, throw it away, and then we cleaned like honeysuckle and picked up any tree branches and stuff that were hung up. So we can do simple stuff like that. We don't necessarily need anything special.
Don't need you feel it's covered in your other maintenance lines, you don't need a
I think
special
we can
line
do
item
that,
or?
but to your point, like Black
In his
Creek.
budget.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right,
Black Creek would be
cool.
a big item if we had to do it again, because that was like 100,000
yeah,
with an outside contractor,
right.
So,
Maybe that's further out than our 5-year plan, so that's fine. I just wanted to
Yep.
make sure. Okay.
Are there any other questions on the committee? All right. Any questions in the gallery from Alderman? Step onto the mic.
Hey, Dan. Brentwood, 8537 Douglas Court. One real small thing. Do we still have like the solar street lights in them? Do you still have some of those?
I have one.
I mean, we haven't put some of those in like a year, and I have a feeling there's going to be like another wave of them. I think they're working very well, so that might be something to consider. I know they're a couple $1,000, so maybe it doesn't justify a line item, but I think I finally worn down my cul-de-sac. They might be okay with getting one, so.
Yeah, and I know I found a company online that I wanted to explore it. It's like a 16-foot with a stainless pole, but it was smaller because we were limited, like the space, between the curb and the sidewalk, or else I'd have to bend around the sidewalk to put the base in. These have a smaller base. But I don't know enough about the operations. I'd like to explore those.
I mean,
they were like $1,000 each.
Yeah, maybe it's not a line item, but I just feel like having some of those in inventory has been good, because when we can just pop them in when we need it instead of going and buying them, and I don't know, that might be something to consider.
Great. Are there any other questions? Before we move on to citizen comment, I just wanted to kind of recap our schedule. We have, our next meeting is the 22nd, right? And then our placeholder, if we need it, is the regular meeting of November 7th. And then the idea is that we would do a first reading on the 11th. That's our timeline. To the extent possible, at that 22nd meeting, and the departments to present are fire, police, IT, admin, and EDST. Can we just, lay over what might routinely come up on Ways and Means to the 7th? To the extent we're able to do that. I know
Follow up from tonight?
yeah, to the extent it's the meeting. We have an alderman meeting in between the 22nd and the 7th. So I'm not intending to frustrate city business, but my goal in suggesting that is, to the extent there's a thread to pull or a department head wants to come back and provide additional information, we can use that 7th as a date to do that, and then maybe load up, and the other
maybe the other, what I would think of housekeeping, ways and means, normal routine business can go on there.
It makes sense.
Because that way, and I, and if, I know Alderwoman Tice will not be there, but you'll at least know.
And just, I want to
that'll
make
be-
sure everyone else is here, just so that there's a quorum on the 7th. So
I will be there. I mean,
okay.
barring some
Yeah.
medical emergency, I will be here. So, and that way, and then, so we have the departments yet to come, and then Parks and Rec will kind of, we'll come back and revisit the subjects that we covered tonight. Does that work? That seemed to be like a
Gives us
calendar
enough
that
time.
would, that way it's kind of orderly and we know what we're in for. And again, to the extent we know what is being presented at the next meeting, I say this to the committee and also aldermen in the gallery or the ether. If there's something that's deeply concerning or strikes you, that's, please, to the extent you're able, email those questions ahead of time. Those topics that are going to take maybe a deeper dive. So that way we, to the best we're able, set up our department heads, and put them in the best position to be able to meaningfully answer that kind of question. I find that tends to work well before this gets before the board. So that was, I just wanted to circle back to that scheduling. The next item on the agenda is citizen comment. Is there anyone in the gallery that would, any citizen that would like to come forward, address the Ways and Means Committee? If so, please state your name, address, and you'll be given 3 minutes. I am not seeing anyone coming forward. Is there anyone online? All right, well, thank you, everybody. This was a great first meeting. I know it was a long one, but it's clear a lot of work went into it. And seeing no further business, this meeting is adjourned.
We don't do anything for legislation. It's just finance, admin.